So why do we paint on mid-tone values, and why do we mix our colours on the same types of values? Join me now, let's find out. Welcome back to the painting channel, everyone, and I just wanted to look at why we all tend to paint on mid-tone colours and not choose the white colour. We all complete our canvases, they come to us from the shop white, and our boards we paint with white gesso. 9 out of 10 times. I do know that you can get clear gessos for natural linen canvases, but that's something that's very, very different. But what I wanted to talk about is why do we colour the surfaces that we paint on? There is a good reason for it. One of the obvious reasons is that when you're looking at colour relationships between one and another, then you judge one by the other. In other words, if you've all seen pictures where we put, well, if I can demonstrate it quickly, and that is that if we have a white value and we put in a yellow, then the reason you can see that yellow is that it is darker than the white. But so that is the darkest element on this paper, on this board. Now, if I go in with a darker value of that yellow and do this, very simply, you can now see that the darkest element on this white is, of course, the yellow that I've just put there, which means that the yellow inside is substantially lighter, but it's still darker than this. So the thing is that when you have a bright, stark surface such as this white, it does affect how we perceive and how we mix our colours. One of the things that often is brought home to me, years ago I was always told, and I believe it to be true, that when we paint, we often paint things way too light compared to what they really are. If we were to think of it like a camera where you take the normal reading for that photograph or that shot or that scene that you're looking at, and if we stop down maybe 2/3 of a stop, even more, and we make the picture richer, darker by virtue of that, as opposed to potentially overexposed if we have it either as it is, depending on the shooting conditions. So it's really no different with the painting, and we react to this color and we create this color if that's what we're looking to do by the fact that we've got this white here. So now if I say, well, that is the color I need, but actually do I need it darker? Well, I don't know. But if I do this to it, now, had this board been this colour to start with, I might have turned round to someone and said, well, actually, that yellow is spot on the colour I'm looking for. Here, it's spot on, because that's the lightness I wanted against this dark tone. But against the white, it looked positively dark. And you can keep this going on all the time. So I'm going to not do that. What I'm going to do is talk about, let's take this away for a moment, and let's look at the same scenario on here. Now, if I am looking to paint a yellow colour on this board, then instead of that being a darker colour than the white, of course, it's now being judged by this tone. So this colour here, this base colour, is affecting how my brain perceives this one. Now, if you remember back to here, put the same colour on there, They're both the same colour, but you can see very clearly that they do distinctly look one dark and one light, and yet you know that I've just taken it off the palette and it's exactly the same colour. It's the same value of that yellow. And it doesn't matter what I do, I can't see its true relationship. So when we go to a mid-tone ground, whether it's warm or whether it's cool, is not exactly that important. It does have a bearing, but it's not absolutely that important. What is important to have a value that is sort of around that mid-tone. If you think of tones in a scale of say 0 to 10, 0 being white, 10 being black, therefore you have a grade of greys all the way through that to 10, from 0 to 10, white to black. If you take 5 as being the middle tone of grey, then what you're looking for here when you colour up your piece of work to prepare it to paint on is you're looking for something around that 5 value, so that you know that if you put a colour on there that is lighter than 5, you can see it. Here it doesn't look like a 5. It doesn't look like it's somewhere in the middle of the grey tone, and yet here it's much lighter. So what you would be doing now is if you put on a darker value, say this blue, now this is very different to a mid-tone 5. This is somewhere up in the 7s or wherever. On here you can see it distinctly looks dark, and they are fairly similar, okay, because you're going dark, but you cannot get this to go lighter. You cannot make these yellows like this yellow. So if you take a situation where you have, let's just put a pretend line down, and we got 5 there, 4 and 6, okay, just argument's sake, then this will look, say that this blue here is a 6, and it is a 6 on here, pretty much. But what I can't do is that if this is now my mid-tone, which it purports to be, I cannot make anything 4, 3, 2, 1 or 0. I cannot go down, because every one of these marks, even if I go in with a white like so, it is, well, I had to, if I put white on, of course I'm not going to see it. So there's another prime reason why we use a mid-tone. But you can even see that this lemon yellow, where I've used pure white and it's as close to as light as I can possibly make it. But if you make that this is your mid-tone, then of course this is still above the 5 in that regard. It can't get down to the 0, which this one could. If I put this on and do transitions down, and we go to white here, for instance, there is my white, and if I do that, I in theory can creep from my 0 to my 5, and I could take that all the way through. Let's just say that that is my darkest color, which is my 10, and I can bring that down this way, and I can add a little bit more just to help me out. But you can see what I'm driving at, that you can actually grade this from 0 to 10 quite happily, because you have the 5 which is designated in the middle, but you can't do that on a white ground. So we do tend to use a colored ground to paint on, and it allows us quite easily to identify very early on in a painting that we're creating. We can establish our darkest darks quite happily, and we can see them all, so it doesn't matter what we're painting. So that one of the main reasons then that we paint off of a mid-tone value, whether it's warm or whether it's cool, and we can call this a 5 value for argument's sake, is the fact that we can see all of our colours pretty much early on. in terms of if we paint something of the same value as this, of course, like trying to paint white on white, it will disappear to a greater extent. But what we're trying to establish is we're trying to, as I tell all my students to do when they're painting, is to establish on whatever it is they're drawing, whether it be a still life, a plein air they're doing, or indeed a photo of their favorite whatever, is once the drawing is done and they're starting to think about the color that they wish to use, is to go in and establish their darkest darks right from the get-go and also their lightest lights. Now, we are blessed these days with so many wonderful colors out there that we can choose from on our palette. We could have so much color on a palette that we would need one probably 3 foot by 5 foot just to get all the different colors on if we put a small squeeze out of each. That's true. But what we haven't been able to do, and we will never be able to do, and that is to buy a tube of light. We cannot buy light in a tube. We have to create light through the placement of color and values of those colors next to each other to create a sense or feeling of light. Now, I heard once, and this is not my saying, and you'll hear me say it several times, that it was once said that when you paint an apple, you do not paint an apple. You merely paint the light that falls upon the apple. And I don't know where that came from, and I'm sure somebody out there may know and can put it in the comments. But it's a very, very good sort of philosophy to think about and to work toward, because, you know, literally if light was taken out of the equation and you looked at me in a very darkened room, you're not going to see your hand in front of your face, much less anything else. And with the merest peak of chink of light somewhere from the outside world, then you just start getting a little glimmer of what's in front of you. And when you open the curtains fully, of course, you see everything as clear as day. And it's the same thing when you're painting a picture. For instance, if you were to establish for a lovely, let's just say we were doing this nice, very nice, moody, shall we say, sunset, nice sunset. It doesn't really matter. This is just to play around. But let's get this straight. It's a nice little sunset, and we put our bright oranges in, lovely big bright colors going in like so, and we really want to punch that light up, so we just go for it, and that's beautiful. But now if we want to put our light sun in, which is the brightest thing in the picture, it doesn't matter how hard I try, I can put 6 tons of paint on there, and I'm just not going to get the effect that I seek, because I didn't think about my extents or extremes of color. Had I done so, had I gone in with this picture and I had established all my darks to start with, let's just do this one again very quickly, like so. I've established my dark values, and I want to establish my lightest values. Let's use this thing again. Let's go in and put our lovely bright yellow, vivid, orangey glow in of the sun there. And we might even get that just a little bit paler, like so. Now we've established our darks and we've established our lights. Now the thing is that we know that all the colors of the sky around that sun down to that dark mass of the ground are very bright and very vibrant. Of course, no one's taking that away. But we have to make sure that if we tell ourselves that this is the darkest thing on our palette or on our painting, and this is the lightest thing on our painting, then we can't mix a lighter color than that. We can't mix a darker color than that. So if that is the given, if that is the rule, that's lightest, that's darkest, then everything else we put into this picture from here on in has to be somewhere in the middle of those two values or those two colors. So now if we then go back into this and we start establishing all our sun and our light skies, now we can say that these colors are going to be very, very bright for sure, and we can make them however we wish to in the terms of the colors that we have on our palette. But we know that when we finished, this sun is going to stand out. So I've just gone over it a little bit. But you get the idea that now, because everything around our sun is darker than the sun, and we've got all these lovely rich reds coming into our painting, doesn't matter how we do them, there we go. Just make that a little rounder would be good, wouldn't it? But now, because I've done that, our sun is suddenly still strong. It's still bright. I've got this wonderful aura of oranges and yellows around the sun, giving me that beautiful sunset that I was seeking to paint. I've still got the darkness on the ground. Fantastic. I've not lost that. But here, the sun is lost. Here, it is not. Okay, so if I get seduced into really bright colors too soon, I could end up needing a brighter one and having nowhere to go. On this occasion, by putting it in first, I have it set up. I know that that's my brightest mark, and everything else has to fall between the light and the dark. So that is why you have to suggest your lightest lights and your darkest darks. But if you try and paint your lightest lights on here, of course we can put our darkest darks on, no problems at all. But then when you start putting on your almost white colors, then they are very, very hard. And that's got a lot of yellow in it. But if I come even this way, it's very, very hard sometimes to see exactly where you've been and where you need to go. So yes, you could paint on there. It's a lot more difficult, and this is so much more easy to create an image based on a mid-tone color to start with. And you can actually translate that whole idea here going to the palette. The palette that I'm using is a mid-tone grey. And if I put my dark on there, I can see my dark very, very clearly. And if I then put my light on, well, you don't really need me to do this because you've only got to look at the colours up there. But I can see my colours very, very clearly. It's only if I was to try and mix an absolute mid-tone that I would have to struggle to do, I think. But you start getting a mid-tone where you're trying to mix that value of grey that mimics this grey. Now if you squint down, we're not actually on it, but we are almost there. And if you squint down, this colour starts to disappear where these are still strong and visible. So by using a similar mid-tone here and on your canvas, you do achieve the ability to see your lights and darks very, very early on. Nail those in place before you move on with the whole painting. So there you go. I did ramble a bit. I do apologise. I tried to convey a point, and if that point helps you, I'm really pleased. That's fantastic. It's what it's meant to do. And that said, if you've liked this and you got something from it, then please put a like in the like area. And there's more of this sort of thing on my Patreon page. So if that interests you, then pop over to Patreon, take a look at it. You can get involved for as little as $5 a month. It costs no more than maybe a good cup of coffee somewhere. And if you want to see everything on there, then of course $10 will nail that one. But take a look. We've also got a personal Facebook Patreon page, which is purely and exclusively for my patrons. It's a place where I can interact with you and help you and look at the work you've done based on either on what you're doing at home or indeed offer something that you followed me on one of my tutorials. So that's there. Take a look at it, and you're so welcome if you get involved. Fantastic. That helps me support what I'm doing on my channel, making more videos, getting equipment that is fitting to doing a better job, and yeah, helps me make more. So that sort of support is fantastic. Thank you. In the meantime, if you're not a subscriber, check out and subscribe. It does not cost you anything to do that, but it really is valuable to me as a channel that is growing to know that people are watching it and that you're enjoying it. So like the video, like all the videos of mine you see, and other people's too. There are tons of people out there creating content. Like the videos, subscribe to their channel, and subscribe to mine if you would. Fantastic. Catch you all very, very soon. Bye-bye for now, guys. Bye-bye.